Welcome everybody, Yankee Chronicles. Listen to me. We're in a time machine today, I guess. All right, welcome everybody to Pinstripe Chronicles. I'm Tats. I think I'm Tats. I might be Evan today. Who knows? I'm here with Rob, and it's definitely a Friday, and we were talking a little bit about some of the rumors and needs and what's what with the infield and the outfield, and I think the infield really needs to be the focus this offseason. And I think the approach that Cashman needs to take is to go after the needs rather than go after the names. I think that's the way that they're going to be able to actually put this all together and take that next step forward. We already know that shortstop's going to be the big need. But is there anywhere else that you could think of where they need to really make some adjustments to really get this team where they're supposed to be?
It depends on what they want to do at first base. You know, if Rizzo is back, then they're probably not going to spend big at shortstop. So they really have to figure out which one of those two positions is the big one for them. I would think that shortstop, because there's so many names. You know, you said, go after the need, not the names, but you have both there at the shortstop position in free agency. So if they wanted to make the big splash, that could be the shortstop. And I'm on board with Correa. I know Evan's not. I know a lot of Yankee fans wouldn't be, but I would.
I'm on the fence because I see Evan's point. We can get, we can still get a top tier shortstop not named Correa. Seager, right. Names like that.
Yeah. But I think it all depends on what they do at first, because if they move on from Rizzo, they're not going to spend big money on two positions like that. I just don't see it happening. That's not the way they're operating. So they have options. LeMahieu could play first. I don't like that, though. I'd rather him be at third base or second next year. Gallo could move to first, which I'd be a lot more comfortable with him at first base than LeMahieu. But I really think it's up to Cashman in the front office what position they want to spend big on, because you're not getting a Seager and Rizzo. So if they bring back Rizzo, you're probably getting a Jonathan VR type, or one of those stopgap, maybe even a Chris Taylor. That's a guy that can play all over the place. So maybe they go that route, and that would allow you to keep Gio Urshela, and you can use a bunch of different guys at different places. So it all depends on what they deem as the biggest need. If they want Rizzo back that badly, we're not getting Seager, Story, Correa. That's my opinion. I could be wrong.
No, what I would like them to do is focus on first base first. I know shortstop is the bigger need, and it's got the sexier free agents pool. But you already saw the difference in the infield from Voit to Rizzo, and what Rizzo provides to this team, especially when you have a lefty first baseman. We talked about that during the season, how important that was. And if you focus more on Rizzo, you can still get away with signing, like you said, like a VR or even a Anderson Simmons. We could get on a lower deal because everybody's going to be chasing the bigger guys. And give yourselves a little time. Give him, like a 2-year deal with a 30-year option type of thing, while you're still waiting to see where the minor league development is in shortstop. With Volpe and Peraza and those guys, to figure out where you're going to fit those pieces in, while you still have years of control with, you still have LeMahieu, Torres, Urshela. It gives you even Sanchez and Higgy. It gives you a little more of. It broadens the window to really cement those roles.
Yeah, and I think it all also comes back to Cashman finally admitting that this team needs some athleticism. Yeah. So that's something that they have to look into as well. Anthony Rizzo doesn't necessarily fit the term athleticism, although he is very, very good defensively. He's not going to bring you a lot in terms of speed and, creating runs on the base pads, but he's still a very valuable piece, and I would not be opposed at all to him coming back. I mean, they could technically, for the price it would cost them to get a Seager or a Correa, they can get like 3 or 4 guys for that price tag. I mean, assuming they get close to 200 million, Rizzo could be a high price player, so they might even, walk away from him if it doesn't fit the budget, because we know there's going to be a budget. Just because they went under the tax this year doesn't mean they're going to go over it next year.
Yeah.
So they could maybe get a guy like Marte for the outfield and move Gallo to first, and then just kind of roll with it. Or maybe they trade Gio for a bullpen arm or something like that, sign VR. That does give you a switch hitter who's got some versatility. Marte certainly adds a ton in terms of athleticism, and Chris Taylor would as well. I mean, there's a lot of just really speculation at this point, because Matt Olson's a name that's been thrown out there, but there's been no indication that Oakland's going to make him available. They can afford him on 2 years of arbitration. It's not like he's going into free agency.
No, exactly.
Yeah, that screams Luis Castillo all over again. Everyone's like, oh, the Yankees are going to get Castillo, when the Reds never really made him available. And it was just kind of Twitter making up this whole big thing. I would love Matt Olson. If Oakland makes him available, then yeah, go after him. But we really just have to see, like you said, what position they go after first. And it's probably going to be shortstop, because that's the position that Cashman actually pointed out in his press conference, that we're going to be looking at shortstop among other positions. So that's really what they have to deal with first, I guess, because Gio can be the shortstop next year, but you don't really feel comfortable.
Not every. I'd be nervous about putting him there every day. I really would. Right. I think that Urshela is going to end up being the odd man out as the offseason progresses, because you can trust LeMahieu at third base. And I trust him at third more than first. And that's not to diminish his athleticism. It's just a fact. We've seen it. LeMahieu, he's a formidable first baseman if you want to give somebody an off day, but I think playing him there every day would expose him a little bit. And I'd be very weary of that. And that's why I wouldn't want Urshela at shortstop, because to have him there every day would expose him a little bit. And Urshela still has trade value, even though he had a little his numbers aren't what they were when he first got here. He still put together a solid season when he was healthy. He had some injury hiccups throughout the year, which I think also hurt him. But Urshela just seems one of those guys that he'll bounce back. And like you said, you can get a bullpen arm for him easily. And if you package him with Voit, then that also expands your options of what moves they can make. That might entice Oakland to consider Olson.
Yeah. Urshela does offer a lot in terms of trade value, because he's got a couple of years left on his contract with arbitration. So a team knows they're getting him for at least 2 years.
Yep.
You're getting a solid bat. You're getting a good defender. When he's on, he's one of the best third basemen you're going to see defensively. And he's proven that he can hit. It's not like it's a 1-year fluke. He's been a solid hitter the last 3 years. So, yeah, a team would certainly we're not asking for top prospects. At least I wouldn't be asking for a top prospect for Urshela. But the Yankees could use him to strengthen another area of need, which is the bullpen, because that's a question mark. And if you package Voit, like you said, that can maybe get you a bullpen arm and a lower tier prospect or something like that, just to fill out the farm system. So, but those are two guys that I would think have to be moved on from, because if you're signing a shortstop, let's say it's Seager, just for the sake of argument, you don't need Urshela. They're not trading Torres because he's the younger of the two, and he's probably got more upside at this point in his career, or he does, and he's got a lot more year control.
Cashman's going to want to hold on to Torres and use him at second base to say, oh, okay, see, I fixed him. Cashman's ego is going to get in the way with Torres. That's why I'm putting a lot of doubt that they're really going to move away from Sanchez, because I can't see Cashman putting all this time in. They might go after another. I think it might be Higgy. That might be somebody that goes on the move and get another backup type or a veteran catcher behind Sanchez that can work with Cole.
I don't know what Higgy offers another team. He doesn't hit. I think he's overrated defensively, if we're being honest, because Sanchez has been so below average to bad that it makes Higashioka look really good.
That much better, yeah.
He frames very well, but he doesn't have much of an arm behind the plate, which you need. I think that catcher is an interesting position because they probably should move on from Sanchez. I hate saying it because I love the guy, but you have Tucker Barnhart. He's on the market, or more than likely going to be on the market this year. Whether the Reds non-tender him or they trade him, that's a name you have to look at. And look, it's been a few years since Sanchez had his big breakout. The Yankees' current situation, they clearly have screwed him over. They've ruined him from what he could have been. He's no longer the offensive juggernaut that you can forgive the defensive deficiencies with. You're not going to be like, we can excuse you being bad behind the plate if you're hitting, if he's hitting 270 with 30 plus home runs and a close to 100 RBIs a year, you're going to take that. You're going to take the good with the bad, but you're not going to be like, you're a 205 hitter with some home runs and that's really it. You can't really be like, we're going to take that and also we're going to take the bad behind the plate. So you kind of have to move on from Sanchez. I just don't think that there's anybody in this organization that can fix him. So a change of scenery probably works for him. And I think if you bring in Barnhart, who's really good defensively and can hit, he's also a lefty, that solves a lot of the issues you have at that position.
No, I think that's a good option. It's a name that I haven't heard thrown around until now. But that's definitely a solid option behind the plate. I think Evan brought up yesterday, with making a deal for Merrifield and Perez, and I think that that's actually a very solid idea. That can, if the right people catch wind of that proposal, then that's something that can gain some traction. I think Perez would be a solid. I think Perez would actually help Sanchez. If they opt to keep trying to figure out what Sanchez is going to be. Is he going to? Because he goes to another team and he starts to just take off like he did when he first came up. It's just Cashman doesn't want to be made a fool of, because then he'll have to say that he didn't take the right approach, and he'll never admit his mistakes. So Cashman kind of put himself really in a tight spot this offseason with the catching position.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of have to move on at this point, but we know Cashman's ego won't let him do that. So he might have, if he rolls with Sanchez out there again this year with the same catching situation, and we get another lackluster year behind the plate and at the plate from Sanchez, and Higashioka is your backup, hitting 180 with 10 home runs, and he frames well, that doesn't help you, because then there's almost an automatic out every time you get to that spot in the order. And look at our wild card lineup. The bottom of our lineup was all automatic outs, essentially. We started Higashioka. We went with Velasquez, who, I mean, as good as he was defensively, we knew wasn't a very good hitter.
Yeah.
And, it just kind of masked, or really not masked, it showed the weaknesses on this team in that one-game playoff, especially when your pitcher doesn't pitch well. But, I think it's time to move on from Sanchez. Sometimes you have to admit when you're wrong. He's more than likely going to be non-tendered. There was rumors about it last year, unless a team's willing to trade you something for him, maybe a middle type of prospect, but you're not going to get a lot for a guy that struggled for 3 years now. 3 out of the last 4 years you can say have been rough for Gary Sanchez. I think 2019 was a good year, but 18, 20, and now 21, You're not going to be like, hey, we'll take a top 30 prospect for that. That's probably not going to happen. So you're really going to have to figure that out very quickly in the offseason as well. So Cashman's got his work cut out for him.
He definitely does. And he put him, like we've been saying, he put himself in this hole. He really did. Because he was sometimes being stubborn and waiting out a player's progress can be beneficial. Just because they don't figure it out at 22 doesn't mean that it's not going to click for them at 27. Sometimes players, just like anybody in life, sometimes you figure out your craft. It takes a little while longer. But when you're dealing with a position like catcher, I don't think you're awarded that luxury of that wait time. And Cashman tried gambling with that wait time, and it's starting to backfire.
Yeah. His scouting report is exactly right about him from years ago. They said he's not going to be very good behind the plate, but he hits well enough that you're going to be able to forgive it. So, I mean, how long are we going to keep going on with this if his bat is regressing? If he was hitting, like I keep saying, if he was 2017 Gary Sanchez every year, we're not talking about the catcher position. We're okay with catcher because we got a 30 home run hitter every single year that is doing, I guess, decent enough behind the plate that you're going to live with it. But that's not the case right now. So they really have to figure that out. They have to figure out shortstop. They have to figure out first base. And I think that's really what you have to do there. Those three positions. I think the rotation's okay. The bullpen definitely needs some work, but in terms of the offense, those are the positions that you have to figure out immediately. You cannot wait for the market to start moving like he did last year.
Yeah, the bullpen's going to be interesting. We're going to have to, dive into that also one day because there's a lot of pieces that could be moved with that. But my ideal infield, I would have to say, would be LeMahieu at third. I'm going to say Simmons at short. Torres at second, and then Rizzo at first, and then figure out the catcher from there. I think if you really had a solid defensive infield, I think that's going to start to pave the way to get this team where the fans expect it to be. Because obviously we know where the ownership, their intentions are. They're more worried about their pockets than our happiness. And but for the fans' sake, I think that would be a solid infield, and it gives you the financial flexibility to plug in other pieces as the offseason progresses. The other factor that's going to come into play, though, depending on what you can do, is it's also that there's a CBA involved now. And so those negotiations are going to be brutal. We already saw what happened with the COVID year in 2020, how ugly it got. And that was just to determine one season. When you're going into when they're going into these CBA agreements and they got to worry about multiple years, I think it's going to be ugly, ugly, ugly. And the biggest factor that's going to come out of it is the National League DH. I think that's the move that needs to happen in the new CBA to allow teams a little more flexibility and more options. And that's where you have a player like Voit or a player like Frazier is going to come into play. And the Yankees can improve the roster, moving those guys towards the National League, and I'll throw Andujar in there too. Those are the three guys that you can move to the National League and get some return from to either boost the Major League roster or replenish some weaknesses that are going to start to come up in the minor leagues as these young players start coming up on the majors. Because we know Volpe is going to be around soon. Peraza, I think this year this spring we're going to see a lot of Gil and Medina. I think they're going to get a lot of the spotlight and some of the other pitches. So it does give you that flexibility. But the CBA, I think you're going to see a couple of quick moves from general managers across the game to really improve their rosters as quick as they can before the CBA. And then once that hits, everything's just going to come to a halt.
Yeah, it could be a frenzy at the start and then just a period of nothing.
Yeah.
Which the offseason's long enough anyway, so you kind of expect it. But I think in terms of my ideal infield, ideally the Yankees say, forget the budget. We're going to do whatever we can to put the best team out there. So in terms of best case scenario, it would be Rizzo, Torres, Correa, LeMahieu. Or if you really want to get technical with it, you move Torres, you keep Gio at his best position, you keep LeMahieu at his best position, and you have, that infield. But I think we can afford both. I mean, let's be honest here. The Yankees just don't want to. We can afford Correa and Rizzo. They just don't want to do it.
Yeah,
but that's your best infield.
This is that offseason where you almost need to go into it with the same approach as 2009, where it's don't just spend the money to spend it. If you're spending it wisely, you'll invest that little extra. I'm really hoping that's the way the Yankees approach it, because enough is enough. We've been saying it all year. There's been too many red flags, too many issues. We still don't have the coaching staff isn't even put together yet. The Yankees give a lot of work for themselves, and it's gonna be a nightmare, because anytime you're dealing with contract negotiations, it amplifies all the problems, because everything comes to a standstill because the owners don't want to give anything to the players during negotiation. Not that they can't, I don't see them doing it. And the players are going to want to wait to see what happens with the new contract before they sign a contract with the team. And so this is going to be a wild ride.
It definitely is. I'm not looking forward to it at all. I think the coaching staff, to be honest, I think they know what they want to do. I think they have people in mind. It could be, in organization call-ups or maybe some of Matt Blake's friends, who knows? But I don't think they would have let go of that many people as quickly as they did. Now Willits is going to coach in like college or something like that.
Yeah.
They have another position to fill. But I think they know what they're going to do with the coaching staff. It's just a matter of when it gets announced. The CBA is going to be dirty. It's going to be a bad look for baseball, as it always is. Baseball, for every little thing they do right, like they've had a couple of announcements. They're finally giving housing to minor league players.
Yeah.
Long overdue. They're coming with some sort of some national broadcast thing or whatever that gets rid of blackouts, I think. Something along those lines.
They're working on that as well, yeah.
Yeah, long overdue. But for those two good things, there's going to be a whole mess of bad that comes out of the CBA. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I want them to figure it out quickly, get it done. Let's get to the offseason. But I don't trust Rob Manfred, and I don't trust the Players Association, because they're not saints either. They were part of the reason for the holdup last year. The players kept wanting.
Tony Clark. Yeah, Tony Clark handled that whole 2020 off season. He did a terrible job. If he was running my union, I'd be like, "You're out. You can't speak for us anymore, because you're driving everybody crazy. You're getting nothing done." And as things were coming out, all you hear from with the players, the union rarely made statements, and that to me that's a problem. Especially as a union worker. If my union is not standing up for me, then what do I need you for? If I'm speaking for myself, I don't need you. You're in that position to speak for me. I got a game to play. That's for you to worry about.
No, and they kept saying, the players kept saying during that whole ordeal was, tell us when and where we're going to play. And the MLB was like, all right, well, we want this date. We want to have, 75 games or 80 games or something like that. And the players kept saying, no, we want more money. It's like, you can't say when and where and then when they tell you when and where, be like, no, we want this instead. It's just the whole league came out looking terrible. It was the only league that couldn't figure out.
Yeah.
Basketball had to suspend its season and still came away with the bubble. And that went almost, I would say, went flawlessly, actually.
Yeah.
The bubble was a perfect idea. Football got started. They had some complications here and there. It had to figure things out, and some guys got sick. But overall, football last year went through without a hitch. Hockey I don't think
as well.
Hockey went through fine.
Yeah.
Baseball looked like, the redheaded stepchild of the whole thing, where it's just like they don't know what they're doing. And it's like how this has happened every single time where baseball comes out looking bad. And this is their opportunity to really, if they get this done quickly, there's no hold up, there's no sort of potential lockout or anything like that, then it's a good opportunity for them to show that we are working together, the players and the league, to come to a swift agreement that they want to get baseball back to where it once was, because it has fallen off a little bit. It's still a very highly watched sport, but there's no doubt it's not what it once was in terms of the national spotlight. So they have to figure that out quickly, because I'm afraid it's going to be a disaster. But I'm holding a little tiny sliver of hope that they get it done quickly and we get an off season that's fast-paced, moving, players signing. That's what I want. I don't want to wait 4 months for the first domino to fall like we did last year.
Yeah, no, definitely not. They have to have everything. I would like for them by the winter meetings to pretty much have everything in order. I don't think that's a hard ask. It really isn't. Especially what the other thing I'm hoping is that knowing that the CBA was coming up, and we started to see it with the housing and MLB trying to address blackout situations with the TV markets. So I'm hoping that the negotiations are already in progress. So once the offseason officially hits after the World Series, that it's just a matter of sitting at the table and just ironing everything out, signing the deal. All right, let's get to business. Let's get ready for the next season. Because you can't have a delay into spring training, because that's not going to work. But it's about time that they're actually giving some attention to the minor leagues, and you got people playing for nothing, and still, I think the housing, it's a small step, but at least it's a positive one. But they still have a lot of work to do. I think the salaries need to be better. Not that they're making, bad money, but they could be investing a little bit more into some of I think the salary structure in the minor leagues needs to be addressed. The other thing I really want to address is how they handle the arbitration and the arbitration years and the call-ups. I think that's another problem that a lot of people don't think of. Because you're dealing with a situation, look at Aaron Judge. He's not going to reach free agency until his career is on a downturn. So you're hurting him. He's been lucky enough where his status has allowed his arbitration to get him a decent, a fair value for his branding. But other players don't have that luxury. And by the time they hit, 32 years old to 30 years old and they're a free agent, nobody wants them. And they never got a chance to make that, they never got a chance to get a contract.
Yeah, baseball's weird like that. When you look at football, a player gets drafted. If they're like a first-round pick, you get 4 years and a fifth-year option. That's usually how it goes. Basketball,
and they have to play.
Yeah, and then they have to play. Basketball is, I don't really know the exact specifics, but players are usually ready to go. Baseball, they get drafted. There's like 80 rounds, and then you don't see them for like another 6 years unless you're like a really like ready. Like Leiter is probably a guy that you're going to see in another couple of years, but that's a rare case. It's rare you see a guy come up to the major leagues a year or two after he's drafted, and they have to rethink that whole process. Arbitration's stupid. You have the renewable contract years, and you have arbitration. A player could go 7 years before reaching free agency, and they could have 4 of those 7 years be elite, and then kind of go through a little bit of a decline, and then that hurts their free agency value. So it's weird. Baseball is very weird with the way they do contracts. The way teams manipulate service time is another big issue. I despise that. There's a lot of things you need to work on. I don't think that's really going to be addressed too much this time around, but it's something that should definitely be looked at, because for a player like Luis Heel, I don't think his service time clock started until like September of this year when they called him up officially. He wasn't a COVID call up. He was an actual call up. So that's a way of manipulating service time. I don't like it. I don't like it.
No, what they need to do, what they need
to
to do is they need to have a salary structure year to year rather than arbitration. If you're a first round draft pick, you get that signing bonus of, for argument's sake, $1 million. And then after that first year, you either stay at $1 million or every year you would get a percentage increase on that one of that. And you have 3 years to get called up or traded. Have that as your, the other thing is the Rule 5 draft, I think, has got to be restructured as well. Have your Rule 5 draft where the Rule 5 should be 5 years. If you haven't been called up to a major league roster in 5 years, you're open game. You automatically go into the free agency pool. There's your Rule 5 draft.
Yeah. It's weird because you don't see that in any other sport.
No, it's really ridiculous.
I know baseball has a 26-man roster, but, football team has a 53-man roster. You don't see teams every year drafting from the NFL roster. You draft college players. You can sign players from practice squads, but that's about it. I don't know why baseball has to have so many different things. You got the whole contract stuff. You have 3-4 different levels of minor league baseball, actually more. You have rookie ball, then you have high A, low A, and double, triple, whatever. And some players never see it, never even see AAA baseball, and there's so many levels in the minor leagues. There's so many things with the contracts, and then you have to deal with this Rule 5 nonsense. And it's like, in some cases it never works out. Garrett Whitlock worked out for Boston, but if they would have sent him down, he would have been back with the Yankees. Like, it just doesn't make sense what they're doing sometimes. And there's a lot of things they can get rid of or, alter to make them make more sense. And the Rule 5 draft is one of them. But I think in terms of what they should discuss immediately, the contracts for the minor leaguers, that has to be a key. The major leaguers make enough. Let's not act like a couple of $1 million is bad money, but the minor leaguers, they deserve a lot more. They go through hell. They're traveling on bus to, stadium to stadium and buses. They have to stay in hotels. Now they're finally getting housing after all this time. It's time they treat the minor leagues better. And I think that should be a focal point of the CBA.
Yeah, and I think it'll also increase the productivity with, college baseball and younger, because it gives more. The focus that they really, with the minor leagues is you want to make playing baseball exciting and something that could be rewarding. A lot of kids, they play basketball, football, because if they're at that level of athleticism where they're going to go to, get into a good college for it, they know that their day is coming. They don't have to sit and wait until they need knee replacements in basketball before they're able to play for an NBA team. They're getting, like you said earlier in the show, they go right into it. They don't have to sit and wait for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. When Higashioka came up, everybody was like, "Oh, look at this young catcher." For people that didn't know who he was, not knowing that he didn't really get called up until he was 31, 32 years old. It's sad.
Yeah, and I think in basketball you see the G League, players are going overseas and then signing with G League teams. You really can't get that in football, but baseball, you might see more players instead of going into the draft. Maybe they go to play in Japan, they play in Korea, something like that, to play in those leagues. And then maybe a major league team sees that if they have success and they sign them immediately. But there's so many levels you have to go through. You go to the draft and then you might go to high A, or you might skip that and go to double A if you're really, really good. But then you still have to get through double A because there's always that transition. Oh, triple A is harder than double A. Some players really do well at triple A and they might struggle at double A. It isn't, I hate the whole, triple A pitching is that much better than double A. It is, but it's not like it's this drastic change. Like triple A to the majors, that's a drastic change, where double A to triple A isn't as big of a change as people might think it is. So maybe they have too many levels of minor leagues. Maybe that's what
that too. You should
realign that, make another league instead of having so many teams with 8 different levels of, classes, class A and double A. Maybe you make another league, and then those players in that league can sign with any team they want. I don't know. There's so many rounds of the draft. There's so many different rosters to fill. It's a headache thinking about it.
It is. It gets very exhausting. Well, definitely, that all has to be restructured. And I think it's something that we'll dive into. We dove into it a lot last off season. We talked a lot about the behind the scenes stuff, TV marketing and restructuring. But we might have to visit that in more detail this year as well, for anybody that hadn't heard it. But we'll leave that at that. And we might have to get somebody on that has a lot more insight on it. Because that always helps. But well, we could speculate all we want, but unless you have somebody that's actually going to walk you through and say, all right, this is exactly how it works, it's hard to really, you can spit idea after idea, but if it's something that would never even come to fruition, you're just wasting your time.
Right.
At least, if you can get somebody that can give you, there's a little give and take on it, it adds to the conversation and causes progress. All right, that's going to wrap things up for us today. And just remember, like, share, comment, and subscribe. You are listening on sportname.com/player on Sports Bar Radio. And just remember, wear your pinstripes with pride and play hard.